Welcome to the Wake Before the Day podcast with my parents, Klarc and Bobbie. We'll talk about the Bible and the Holy Spirit adventures. Thanks for listening.
And so I'm really excited to be reading Ruth right now.
Yeah, me too.
Such a good book.
It's one of those, I think it's like just short, and it's like, oh yeah, I kind of have heard that, or the names, but then to actually spend time in it and read it again has been really good.
Yeah, for sure. What I appreciate about this book is you see Jesus' lineage being lined up because God's had a plan for so long to send the one who is to step on the head of the serpent, who is going to redeem Adam and Eve, who's going to fulfill the Old Testament law that God's people couldn't fulfill, and is eventually going to come from the tribe of Judah into this town of Bethlehem. And God lines up much of that in the book of Ruth right here. And so I celebrate just God's faithfulness in the midst of probably what these characters would say is an utter disaster when it comes to life.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say that too. That's so today we're in chapter 2 of Ruth, but what we can't separate, because it is a small book anyway, is chapter 1 from that. And so that's kind of what is standing out to me.
Yeah, fill us in. What did we miss yesterday in Ruth 1?
Sure. Well, we know there's a famine in the land, and this man and his wife and their sons, they travel. And what ends up happening is Elimelech, who's kind of the patriarch of the family, he dies. So his wife, Naomi, now is by herself. She's a widow. And then the two sons, I don't know. I'm just going to say it how I say it. You guys, if it's wrong, just Google it and look it up. But Mahlon and Chilion.
Yeah.
Mahlon and Chilion. They also die. And this is after they've been married. They've married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. And so then the rest of chapter 1, you kind of see this struggle, Naomi saying, you guys go back to your land and go back to your gods. I don't have anything for you. I can't have any other sons. And just remember, historical context here, women are dirt. And so it's whoa.
And if you don't have a man to protect you and to provide for you, you are as good as dead.
And so we have 3, essentially it's kind of I can't even take care of myself, let alone 3 of us out here. And so Orpah does, she returns home. But then Ruth, you kind of read those verses in chapter 1 that I'm sure some of you have heard before, that I'll stay with you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people be my people. Your God, my God. So there's this earnest faith and just curiosity in Yahweh already in Ruth. And she's just saying no, I'm staying with you. And so what ends up happening is Naomi and Ruth return from Moab to Bethlehem. And the very end of chapter 1, verse 22 says this: they are arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. And so, like Klarc said, these women, so this is all before we even get to chapter 2, they are in what looks like the most devastating time of their life. There was a famine in the land. The patriarch, ruler, leader, headship, whatever, of the family is gone. Yeah. And a loving husband and dad. Not to mention then the next 2 heirs are gone. And so there's just tons of heartache and questioning and depression, anxiety, those kind of words, we kind of remove them from this type of text.
If there was ever a time someone would say, God, where are you? And are you good? And how come you're letting this happen? It's in this moment right now.
And so what is just crazy, what we're going to see over the next 2 chapters, though, is in verse 22, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was gleaning. Because then as we go into chapter 2, we read about how Ruth and Naomi are kind of able even to make ends meet and get food. And it's because of these gleaning laws that have been set in place. But really, you can't glean from the crops. You can't gather crops if it's not harvest. So already God is setting the stage where he's saying I know you can't see it yet, but I'm doing something in the midst of this. And that's what we kind of see the beginning of in chapter 2.
If the weight of the famine came earlier in the year, or if the husbands had passed away earlier in the year, there's a good chance they had not met Boaz if they didn't come back at harvest. And so God again is orchestrating this for the good of the people, not only then, but for our salvation,
And
as
for all
Jesus is going to come fulfill all these Old Testament prophecies. And again, I love that God allows the Moabites to be part of Jesus' family lineage and genealogy. Because the Moabites, if you go back to earlier in Genesis, those people, their offspring comes from incest. And so when you're thinking about like God and what family is he going to come to and come from, this is the family God chooses? Like, really? And in it, you see it's not because of your blood. It's not because of your like family name. It's because of Ruth's desire to love and submit to her mother-in-law and essentially say, I'm going to follow your God as well. And they come. And so that's right. When you hop into today's reading, Ruth chapter 2, it says the first two verses, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor. And so when they go, I love the opening scene where Boaz enters. He walks in, verse 4, just as Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters, the Lord be with you. And the Lord bless you, they called back. It's like this big, strong, godly man who's probably a good-looking dude. He's wealthy, but he's humble and kind and generous, walks in, all eyes turn to him, and he blesses his workers. You're like, okay.
But even the timing of that, just then,
yes,
Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted.
Yeah.
And so another, just like God wing there, I know somebody else, this tall, handsome man of God that blesses his workers.
Yes.
Just got that picture.
Cal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Sorry, yes, continue.
But what happens here is then Ruth and Naomi start going back and forth and trying to figure out, how am I supposed to do this? And Naomi's like, hey, Boaz is a good man. Go work the fields and let's see what happens here. And if you go towards the end of the chapter, go to verse 20, for instance, there's a really important phrase that's given. The Lord bless him, that's Boaz, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead, meaning he is fulfilling these Old Testament laws that Ruth might not even know nothing about. She added, that man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers. And so this kinsman redeemer word is thrown around often, and people might not fully understand, like, what does it mean to be a kinsman redeemer?
Yeah.
Well, when you go back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, books that we probably don't have memorized, but there's Old Testament laws that protect the poor, that protect the widows, that protect the immigrant, that protect those who can't protect themselves. And so I'll read you just briefly some of the Old Testament laws that sound so strange, but you see it's God's grace, it's his justice,
right?
It's his mercy and compassion that's coming in and through here. So I go to Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 through 10. Again, it's kind of odd, but it says, if brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law for her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. However, if this man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of the brother-in-law to me. And basically, it's funny because this guy goes before the town elders, and they're supposed to take off their sandal and slap him in the face. You're like, this is so crazy in our 2022 lens, but essentially what they're saying is it is your duty and your honor to take care of your family. And I know that sounds super weird and, the idea of a brother-in-law sleeping with his sister-in-law, but at that time, again, the family line was everything, which if you can recall our podcast and sermon series in January, going back to Judah and Tamar, that's why this was such a huge deal, is because Judah, it was his job to take care of Tamar, which was his daughter-in-law. And he refused to do it. So then Tamar dressed herself up as a prostitute, etc. But that's why. It's because it was his job. So not only that, you go back to Leviticus 25 verses 23 through 28. You have other kind of seemingly odd laws that are put in place to bless people. It says this, the land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine, says God. And you are but aliens, and you are but my tenants. That's humbling for us. Throughout the country that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land, meaning you take care of everybody else and give them their land if they've lost it. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman has sold. If, however, the man has no one to redeem it for him, but he himself prospers and acquires sufficient means to redeem it, he is to determine the value of the year since he has sold it and refund the balance to the man who sold it so he can go back to his own property. Translation, God is saying, I'm going to put Old Testament laws in place. So when disaster strikes someone like Naomi and Ruth, they're going to be protected. Their family line is going to be taken care of. And God's going to use someone who comes from a line of incest to not only bless the people around them at that time, but the Savior of the world is going to come through this family line. And so Ruth it's a small book, like Bobbie said, but it points us to Jesus the entire time. And so as you look at Ruth and look at Naomi in the midst of this, just lean into the Lord in times of loss and hardship and confusion and say, God has been faithful not only to us, but to so many other people. I trust, God, that you're working even when I can't make sense of it, even when I can't see it. And so that's kind of what stood out to me from Ruth chapter 2.
The Lord bless you and keep you. Don't make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give him his peace. Have a great day.